I think we should probably start. And people may join later in the next few minutes. But let's make sure we can finish on time. So everyone, thank you very much for coming to this tutorial, the genetic views and object level operations in Django, and it is will be presented by Diego Mendes and Dan Xiao. So it's my honor to introduce these two awesome presenters. I am Peng Yixian. I am a research software engineer from the National Center for Supercomputer Applications, and I am the co-chair of the tech subcommittee of the US-RSE'24 conference. So let me introduce Diego first. Diego Mendes is a research software engineer at the Institute for the Computational and Data Science of the Pennsylvania State University. He has an information systems engineering degree from the National Technology University of Argentina and a Master of the Software Engineering from Penn State. The two long-lasting and research-related web development projects engineered by Diego include the first one is the Roster and My Legal web applications for the legal scientific collaboration, and the second one, the accounts management system for Penn State high-performance computing clusters. Dan Xiao is a research software engineer in the Research Innovations with Scientists and Engineers team of the Institute for Computational and Data Sciences, Pennsylvania State University. She received her PhD in biophysics from the University of California, San Diego. Dr. Xiao has an extensive experience in developing web applications. So now Diego and Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So we'll jump directly into the tutorial. Welcome, everybody. And first, I would like to thank a lot of people, the sponsors, the organizers, and especially the reviewers who recommended us both for acceptance and for rejection in this and previous events that we applied for, because from them, or at least I learned a whole lot of things. And I fixed a few things not initially planned here, and I'm thankful for the time taken by offering your thoughts. Next, my technical introduction to this talk will be like, this is a simplified version of a real life science-related project, right? The science-related project that Anjing and I worked is in agriculture, but this is not agricultural-specific project. So the tutorial will not be related with the original project, so you can apply it in general for anything that you may need or like to work with. I apologize if the title was misleading for anyone interested in specific applications for agriculture. This is just a general website, internal, used for the Thriving Ag project, which I can begin sharing one of the screens here. This is for this project that Danjing and I have worked at thrivingag.org. And this is led by Penn State, but other institutions also work in this project. So back to the slides. The next thing I would like to do is share a couple of links from here that will be not required, but they are optional, but it's if you can, please do it, about diversity, equity, and inclusion questionnaire. This is a Microsoft form. You can log in there or complete the form without any login required. And the second one is an evaluation for our tutorial. I think this is a Google form, and it may require some that you use your Google account. So directly into the talk itself or tutorial. The tutorial will be divided in 4 parts. The first one will be an environment setup. I hope you were able to install everything that was required, like Python, having access to a terminal, and Git itself, because we are going to go to work with Git a lot. We are not going to do any commits or push or anything like that. I just want to have all the steps ready so that you don't have to type and we don't make mistakes or have to debug during the tutorial. So everything is already there. Even if we run out of time, you still have the complete tutorial ready in your in the repository, which is publicly available. By the way, if you go to the link that I sent yesterday night, you will now also find these slides in case you want to go back and forth or navigate in a different order or stop at a slide that I've already passed. Or if you have questions, please let us know, and Ying or I am going to take care of that. So second part will be an explanation of the problem itself. What will be the development about? As I said, it was related with the Thriving Ag, which what they requested from us is having a way to upload data sets and a place where they can add metadata files for each data set. And the thing that they required in particular is that we have we provide different access levels for different data sets. So it's not that you have permission to log or to read every data set. You may have permissions to read or view or change a specific data set, but not the same. So these require permissions in addition to what Django brings by default. So that's one of the interesting points that this tutorial has. And then we work with the class-based views that Django provides, and at the end we implement those permissions that are required, all in different steps, step by step. I will be explaining to you. And if you want, I would recommend you do the same on your computer, but if you either were not able to install everything that is required or just prefer not to do it, not to do a hands-on experience, I will do every single step on the terminal. I will be moving between terminal, browser, and look into the database. With that, let's move into the first part, which requires the cloning of the repository. Then we go for the setting up of the Python environment, virtual environment. And then we begin with the first step of how to create a Django project without even creating any application. Just by creating a project, Django already provides an administration web page that I would like to mention and show even before we do anything else. Okay, let's move into that. This is the 3 type of Git commands that we'll be using. The first one is git clone, which I will share in the chat so that you can do your own clone. although you already have, if you received the email that I sent yesterday, but just in case somebody else joined, we will be sharing it here. So let me share.
I pasted it in the chat.
You already did?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, let me now then change to the terminal. And again, if I am going too fast or too slow in my terminal or in my talk, and I can change that, please let me know. So this is the first step. We clone the repository, and then we change to the directory containing the repository. We can list what is in there. We see that at the beginning, we only have a README and a doc directory in order to see what directories are and what type of file we are listing, in case you may have any impediment looking at colors or anything. There is a flag that can be passed to the ls command that allows us to see if an element of the file system is a directory. For example, this in this case shows that this is a directory, or if it is an executable file, or what other things. The second command that I showed before in the slide that we are going to use is bit log. And the log, in order to not show a bunch of information that we are going to see unless we limit that to just one first line. Right now, we only have one commit in the main branch, and this is because I have been using one branching model that you may already know about. Let me share this screen. Let me see if you're familiar with this graph. This is a successful branching model that has been used for more than 20 years now, or 10 years. See, it's a note of, it has now a note of reflection in 2020, but it was created in 2010. So this consists of mainly two permanent branches, a master that for diversity and equity and inclusion purposes, we stopped calling that main branch master, and we call it now, and the communities using Git, like GitHub, GitLab, they prefer to call this one main now. So that's what we have, a main branch, which is permanent, where commits ready for production are there, and versions for production releases are committed there. The other permanent branch is develop, where the actual development happens. If it is just a small commit, then you commit directly on the develop branch. But usually what we do is have a feature branches where we open a temporary branch, one of the feature branches, and we do commit after commit. And if we are satisfied with the result, then we merge it back to develop. And when develop is ready, we will merge eventually back. There are other types of temporary branches, like release branches for whenever we are ready to do a release. And if we discover that there has been an error once it has been released for the public, then we can do a quick hotfix that will end up merging back to both master and develop, so you can keep developing with the error maybe found by an end user corrected. The second, let's say, best practice that I would like to share has to do with commits. Each commit should have whatever is stated in this project, in the README of the subsurface project. And then I will let you know why I selected this one. But it has a README where the contributing part of that README says that a good Git commit message should look like this. First, a single line explaining the commit and in imperative. And then two things, a blank line and one or more paragraphs. Maybe the commit is very simple, you don't need any other paragraph. And this has, the explanation of this has two aspects. One is the format aspect, that keep it limited to 74 characters, so that it will show nicely on tools such as GitLab, GitHub, and others. But also, the important thing is the content. You should communicate the intention of a change on every Git commit. So chunks of cohesive change should be committed together, and then you explain what was the intention, so that even if you commit an error, if your commit is buggy, even if that happens, then the intention is explained, and for others to understand what you tried to do, or for yourself in the future, you will know what was the intention of that change. And since we are at here, we can even look at who created each of the lines of this README and search for this contribution part, contributing, and then where this paragraph of explanation is, there we can see that most of this is now changed 7 years ago, but 13 years ago looks like what has been the original commit for this part, directly from the creator of both the Linux kernel of the GNU Linux operating system and Git itself. And there is an interesting story of why Git was created. They were using something else for control version systems that was given freely to them, but some of the team members reverse engineered that, and they were not supposed to do that, so they were left without the control version systems for the user. So that's why Linus Torvalds said, okay, now we need some tool, because this tool was really good, and we want nothing else that's something that has this functionality or even better. So this is one example of his original commit. It has one line, and it says add some information about properly formatted commit messages. This is the commit message that he added for his part, and blah, blah, blah. But you see the intention communicated in this paragraph and just a single line, so that that commit looks as he explained on how to do the same thing. Then we are going to use Django and create the virtual environment, and the versions that we are going to use, we are now about here. So 5.1 has been released in August. They release in April, August, and December. And depending on what Python version you have, you may be able to use the 5.1, or if you have Python versions, I think older than 3.10, then you will have to use Django 4.2. But that's okay. This tutorial will work with all of that. 4.2 is still a long-term support release, so it will last even longer than 5.1 because there is long-term service support every other year. So with that, let's go back to the terminal and complete the task that we started. If I want to see not just the commit that I have in my local repository, but all the possible commits, I will do all. And if I want a nicer look, I will also do graph. So that's all the commits that we will go through this tutorial. I think we are doing okay with time. So let's go ahead and check out and if you're interested in how I do some commands or how I handle repeating commands, editing the commands and copying and pasting things, let me know. I can explain that as much as you have a similar terminal. I started working in real dumb terminals, which were physical terminals, and now these virtual terminals are much better, so they have improved a lot. So let's go ahead and I tagged every commit that I did, so we don't have to do more complicated things than that. No, we don't have to copy numbers. Just let's go ahead and check out the first commit. And in order to avoid this long message at each checkout, one thing that we can do is git config. And what is explained here, git config advised detached head, and we set that to false. Is that okay? Now I will do a reverse search and do the log again. Excuse me. So now we are here at the first tag. This tag is the equivalent of doing the first command that you execute in Django for starting a project, which is the Django admin start project that is shown in the slides. So we did this part. Let's move on to the creation of the virtual environment now. For a virtual environment, whatever version of Python you have, we are going to use the module VM. There are other virtual environments that you can use, but this is the recommended one. And for this project, it works perfectly well. I will name it DJ Django _ virtual environment. If you are copying things directly from the slides and pasting, take care, because this is a PDF, and PDFs sometimes, for example, when you use underscore or dashes, they may not paste well on the terminal. So make sure that you use the name as you read it, even if when you copy, you cannot paste. So let's go ahead and do these three things. Here I have my terminal. Let me go to my first terminal. So it was playing around with this earlier and left some things open. So now that we have that, let's first list what we have in the first commit. We have now a source directory But before changing into that directory, let's go ahead and do the virtual environment creation. So in my case, it will be Python 3 module VM. And as I explained before, I will do Django virtual environment. That may take a few seconds to create. But now, if we do ls, we have not just the source directory and the documentation directory, we also have a virtual environment directory created. And in order to make use of that virtual environment, let's first have a look at what's inside that. There's a bin directory or binaries directory or directory for executables in case we do more complicated things with C header files and stuff. We have a directory for the include. This is like traditional standard Unix directory structure. And then we have the lib for the libraries, right? Within that libraries, we will have a version of Python which will be the same that you already have in this type of virtual environments, which are very simple. Then we will have side packages, and inside that, we'll see that there will be directories for each of the packages that we have installed and so on. In the binaries, depending on what operating system you have locally, if like me, you have Bash, you will use this activate script. If you have C shell, you may use activate C shell. If you have fish, you will use that. If you are using it from native Windows command line, you will use this. If you are using the Windows subsystem, you will have a Linux, so go ahead and use this. The other couple of commands that we have is pip itself for installation of packages, and Python, which are these things in light blue are symbolic links. If you want to see what they are in a more detailed information, we can add the L flag for long format, and we see that this Python points to Python 3. Python 3 points to my system Python, and 3.11, I think, see, these two point to Python 3, and Python 3 points to my system Python. Okay, so with that, let's see how to start using virtual environment that we have. So in order to use that activate, in order to activate that virtual environment, we do the source command, which can also be called as just dot. But in order to not confuse the dot, which means the current directory, with other type of things, just use the command source, but dot will also work. And then we pass the directory name of the environment. Under binaries, we use the activate. And as soon as we activate that environment, our prompt changes. And now we have something that indicates that we have the Django virtual environment active. In order for what I named Django virtual environment to be truth, let's see what packages we already have installed there. With the pip tool, we list and we have pip itself and setup tools, which is part of the Python packaging system. So let's go ahead and install Django now. The pip command can work with the install subcommand, and then we pass Django. If we want to work with exactly the same version that I worked here, you can pass 5.1. If you don't pass a specific version, pip will download the latest version available for Django, which is probably 5.1.2 today. But this changes more frequently. in my case, I have already been using this, so it doesn't download things from outside. It's cached. But now, if I do pip list, I already have Django installed together with a couple of dependencies, the A, SGI reference, and SQL parse, which are two of the dependencies that Django has. With that, I think we are ready to begin using the application. I said that, for example, let's see. I said that the first commit is the result of this, of Django admin start project tutorial. We don't have to execute this, but we can execute Django admin just to look at what the version, for example, is. And then, because this is already executed for you in the first commit, what we are going to do is try to do a migration. Once, let's try to run the, let's try to skip this first and run the run server, and we will see what happens. So we will have to do these two commands. So first migrations is like populating the database, but this will be interesting to see it happening. So let me show you how. What we will do is move into the source directory now. Let's list what is inside that source directory. There's, at this first commit, there's only a tutorial directory, which is the output of when the Django admin start project was executed. So, and inside that, we can list this recursively. Inside the tutorial, there are a couple of files in there. There is a web server as gateway interface, and what is replacing that, which is an asynchronous server gateway interface. We are not taking care of that too much, but two interesting things that we will look at is this settings file and URLs file. So let's have a look at that first, and then we will run the command. So I will do in my terminal with no windows, tutorial settings. And that is mainly a configuration file. We will work a little bit with this, installing different applications. But as you see, Django already has some, what Django calls applications, like admin of auth, which is both for authentication and authorization, content types, sessions, and so on. I think we are doing pretty well with time, but let me keep going. Other things that I recommend if you need to do is this time zone, set it specifically for your time zone and so on. The most interesting thing though will be this, that this is what we are going to work through. Most of this file initially is just a comment, a big comment, but let me search so that I can find this part. This is the only really code part, which does what is explained in this comment. So it's a Python list, if you're familiar with the language, with only, so far, only one item in the list, which is the result of this path function. And in order for that path function to work, it has been imported there. So this code has already been has automatically been created for you just by running the startup Django command. And it has a URL and it has a view, which is what will be routed from the URL to the view. So by default, there will be a home page, but if you also write /admin, then it will take you to this admin thing. And let's see how it works. First, we are going to try manage Pi just on its own. And we see that there is a bunch of subcommands. In fact, if we do redirect the output of that command to something like less or more, we can use anyone depending if you want to go up and down or not. But at the beginning, we have some subcommands for authentication, some commands for content types, and some commands for generic Django stuff. What we are going to use here is the run server command. So let's again go with manage run server. Let's try this. It will complain, but let's see that complaint and how to fix it. It started a web server. If we click in here, and I share the my web server, we will see that little rocket firing up. So there's already a full website running just by running the Django start project. All this code for this has been generated. But if you want to do the .admin, there will be something that will cause an error, right? So let's see how to fix that. It says no such table Django session. It seems that it needs a session and so on. So let's go back to the terminal. An error is also displayed in the terminal. Let's interrupt that. We don't need to interrupt, but let's do it just to see what the original error message was. We start and it says, hey, you have 18 unapplied migrations. This is the key. Your project may not work properly until you apply the migrations for apps, admin, auth, content type, and sessions. So these apps are the ones that need to store information, and the way to store information is in a database. How do you populate that database? By running this migration. This is all provided by Django itself, so there is no code that I need to write for that. It is provided by Django. So let me open another terminal here, and I will execute this, and we will see how these 18 migrations work. Now I am in my 0 terminal because I started using a 2 and I closed the previous ones. So let's do this. I will source that Django environment first in this terminal 2 and do manage Pi migrate. Here we see that migrations were available for admin, auth, content types, and sessions. And these are those 18 migrations that the error message talked about. So this is the admin application, initial migration, admin 2, admin 3, and so on. And then auth 1, 2, 3, also for sessions. Every application that has a model which needs to store something in the database will need one or more migrations to be executed. And I didn't explain model or applications yet, but we start hearing that as the vocabulary that is handled for Django. So now one thing what we can do, in fact, let me interrupt this and use the 0 terminal as the first one. So let me run the run server. Before doing that, let's execute one more command that we will need, which is manage create super user. And that create super user that is also mentioned in the slides, if you are looking at the slides now, requires, or doesn't require, but if you don't pass it on the command line, it will ask you for a user and an email. We are going to use, for all examples here, we are going to use the example.org domain, so that which is created for that purpose. So let's see how that create super user works. We will need first a username or a user, and we will call that user admin. And it will request an email, and the email that we are going to use is admin@example.org. It will require a password for that user, so make sure if you're doing it hands-on that there is a password easy for you to type and remember for the next steps. Excuse me, because we are going to use it on the command line. Great. We are ready to begin to restart the execution of the run server now. Now it no longer complains about not having migrations applied, and then we can go ahead and see the rocket, but also we will try to see what is inside the admin application that it is there. It will require a username, that is the username that we created, which is a super user in this case, and the password that we enter. So without having done anything yet specific to our project, this is Django's generic set of tables. We will see tables in a minute. And this is already the set of the functionality that Django provides. It provides users. That's the user that Django created. And if we click in here, we can see we can complete with file name, first name, last name, and if the user is active or not. If it is staff, that staff status means that you can use this administrative or admin web interface. And in this case, only this user will be the super user status. This is like having root access on a Unix operating system, but for a Django web application or web project. Then there will be groups. Whenever we create groups, we are going to be able to assign users to groups. And then there's a bunch set of permissions that we can assign directly to the user or to the group. The user has this possibility. We can also go to the groups part. Whenever we add a group with a name, we can assign permissions to the group. But let's stop here for a moment with the application, and let's go to the terminal again, we'll see where we are at, let's say. So rather than having all this log thrown at my screen, let's divide this screen in two. And let me source this once more. So that we can have, in case we need this half terminal, let's say. And for example, let's do git status, which will let us know what is in there. So it looks like there are things that are untracked now. And this is the Django virtual environment that we created. There is also this DB SQLite 3, and there is this PyCache directory. So let's do one thing. Let's move to the top of the directory of the Git project, and if we list there what files or directories are there, we will see the files or directories that we saw before. But if we add a -a, it will show us all the files or directories, including the hidden ones. And the hidden ones are the ones in any Unix system that begin with a dot. So we see that this just a dot directory, we know that it is the directory because it has this slash, and because my ls output is in blue. We have the parent of the current directory. So the dot is just the current directory. Dot or double dot is the parent of the current directory. This is a type of path that we can use to navigate the directory structure called a relative path. There's also a type of path called an absolute path, which is when we start writing from the root directory, which is just slash. So slash home slash is, if you start with a slash, it means start at the root directory, and then you may use one or more slashes to separate directory levels. But one thing that we see now is this git directory that is showing there, which has all the administrative information for Git. So if we do status once more, now that we are one level up, it looks like at that level there is this Django virtual environment, source, and PyCache. Let me see if I have. Okay, so we have been using 50 minutes now. Thank you, Danjing. And let me finish with that, and then we can make a short break. One thing that we can do to avoid seeing things that we don't want to track is create a file called git-ignore. And if we direct the output of the cat command, which is nothing for now, but having no other input, it will take the input from my terminal. What we can do is ignore this. So just that, Django virtual environment. Also ignore the database, files called database SQL. And also ignore these things that if you program in Python, or part of the Python community, they called dunder, PyCache dunder, or double underscores. So dunder, PyCache dunder is also one thing. And also, if we want to ignore itself, we have to add this file that will be created. And then we do Control D to end input. If we list all files, now we see that it ignored there. And if we do git status once more, now these files that we on purpose want to ignore are ignored, and it's clean. So let's move on to the next step in this section, which is a short explanation of what the permissions are in Django. So for that, let me show you a database. Meanwhile, let's have a look at this slide, which is the 4 permissions that we have in there. So with the database browser that I recommended, if you wanted to install in the email that I sent yesterday, this is how it looks. And we see that from these 18 migrations that were applied, 11 tables were created. Some of these tables are, for example, from the auth application. Some others are from Django, more generic things, and some are from SQLite itself. If you use a different database, they may be called different, or maybe these sequences are stored somewhere else in a different database. But in this one, it creates 11 tables. And for example, auth, which stands for authentication and authorization, has a group table, also has a user table. And user table, we see that there are the things that we have seen in the web interface, like a username, first name and last name, email, and so on. For the group is very simple. It just stores the group's name, and there is something which will relate two tables, like a user and a group. And because a user in Django may belong to none, one, or more groups, and a group may have no users or one user or many users, there is a many-to-many relationships in relational database parlance that you will need to add. Those many-to-many relationships are implemented by means of another table. These two tables are meant to represent entities, like a group and a user, that are something like is very tangible, right? A relationship between these two is going to be just another table with pointers to the IDs of these other tables, which is the auth, user, and groups. It just has something that lets the database know what users belong to what groups. This is not an entity. It doesn't represent an entity. It represents a relationship between two entities, but both entities and relationships in relational databases are represented by tables. The other thing that I wanted to show is this. There's the auth permission, which is also used by the auth application, which has a ID itself, a code name, which is the permission name that will be used whenever you write code, and the name, which is a more human readable name for that permission. And it has a content type ID which is the pointer to this table, to the Django content type, to this ID, and this because each permission will only point to one content type. This is a one-to-many permissions or many-to-one permissions, a relationship between tables in a database. So one-to-many are represented by the parent's primary key, which is content type, will be implemented like one more field in the child table. So this permission will always have something pointing to the content type. For example, let me show that Django content type in a query. We can select all from Django content type, and we can call it C for content type. If we execute that, we see that there are 6 rows there. One row is for admin application and log entry model. Each application may have one or more models. Here we start like understanding a little bit better the relationship between applications, models, projects, and so on in Django. Basically, there's a project, there are applications, one or more applications that can be used by a project. Also, applications can be generic enough so that you can use it in different projects. And each application may have models. So, for example, the auth application, the authentication and authorization application has one model called group and another model called user, and another model called permissions, which are applied to groups and users. And if we join that with the authentication permission, let's call this one P. These are aliases, right? And we tell this join that the C or content type ID should be matched with the permission content type ID. So this from the content type table will match this field in the permissions table. So now we see there are 6 permissions. Oops. What is the error here? Near content type ID, syntax error. E for permissions. You see the error better than I do. Content type. So I didn't own. Content type. Oh, okay. Probably that is my error. Permission content type ID. I was using the wrong alias instead of this one. So what we have seen is that we have 6 content types, and we notice that there are, for each content type, admin, we see four permissions: permission to add, permission to change, permission to delete, and permission to view. These 4 permissions are applied by default to any content type that Django handles. For example, users, you can have permission to add users, to change users, to delete users, or to view users, and groups, and so on. Because we had 6, and now the query result output 24 rows, you can do the math, and 6 times 4 permissions. This is the number of of rows that we got. With that, we have finished the first part. So let's take a brief break here. You can grab a glass of water, or if you have questions, I can answer those right now. But 5 minutes just to relax a little bit and resume in a moment. So what time is it now? Please.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Diego, for doing this. And okay, so like after you add those test group or those database through the Django admin, right? Where did you find the database to open up that?
Where do you find the database? It's in the same directory. The actual file, you mean?
Yeah, like when you open it,
How you can open the
point
file?
there, right?
Oh, yeah. See this application? I am in wherever I created the datasets
Yeah, for the
repository under source.
Uh-huh.
It's in DB SQLite. That's the
Oh,
file.
oh, I see. It's there.
Have you find it?
Okay, so file is there. All right.
Are you using this tool to open the database? There's also a command line tool that you can use, but it requires knowing more the commands of it itself. It has help.
Yeah, so like yeah, yesterday the email through that it just mentioned the SQLite 3, so I installed that on Mac of Brew, but does that come with a GUI tool as well, or GUI tool need to be installed separately?
In the email I sent to let's say database clients that you can use. One is this one. This one is DB browser for SQLite, and the other is a command line tool. The other is, let me see.
Yeah, the SQLite 3.
Both are free. Both is free software.
Oh, so the GUI it didn't show on the screen when you looked at it. What was the name of the GUI tool
This
again?
one,
Yeah. Somehow the about doesn't show on the sharing screen.
some of the what?
Somehow the about screen
the
window is not showing on the shared screen.
You're right. Okay. Let me see if I can. Some of the about is not showing. Well, let me paste the link so that you can
Yeah,
find it.
sure.
Give me 1 second. So if you Google DB4S is DB browser for SQLite. Let me share that screen. Oh, I can share this. This is the about. This is the name, DB browser for SQL. Let me. If I Google DB4S, this is the web page. that web page has download for different operating systems. This is free software and it's portable, so you can use this on GNU Linux, different distributions, Windows, and
Okay.
Mac OS.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Okay.
You're very welcome. Are we ready for resuming? Second part. Can you give me a hands up in Zoom so that I can see if we are ready to resume? Or if needed, we can wait 1 more minute. Thank you. So let's keep going with the second part. Let me turn my clock on. So second part will be about explaining the problem that we are going to solve, which is a simplified version of this Thriving Ag project that Danjing and I developed. And we will see what participation each of us had. And it was something interesting. So let's first see a little drawing where we can have a useful tool for gathering functional requirements, right? This is a use case diagram. It's not the use case itself, but in the repository that I shared, there's also in the docs subdirectory, there's also this file shared, which we can see that that diagram, but also we will see the use cases more developed. I kept it really simple so that we can understand how the use cases diagram work in case you are not used to doing things with use cases. The most important thing about the use cases is not the drawing itself, the diagram. The diagram is just used as an aid to define scope, but use cases itself are usually defined like it is identified who the primary actor is, like in the case of a create research group, which is this first use case that we have, is the administrator, the scope. So it's usually the scope of the system that we are delivering, although maybe a higher scope or lower scope or bigger scope and smaller scope. It depends on what the audience of your use case is. There's also a level, so use cases to gather requirements should be used on a user goal level, so that this is something that this user, this actor, needs to do. And then it's like telling a story. There may be preconditions, for example, all of this, for in this case, in our project, all of the actors will need to be authenticated. And this points me to the authenticate user, which is a sub-function level use case. So it doesn't pass, if you have read like some literacy in use cases, like, for example, Alistair books, you see that this doesn't satisfy the boss test. If your boss asks you, what have you been doing all day? And you tell, yeah, I've been authenticating all day, that doesn't justify your salary, right? But other things like creating research groups or researchers or updating data sets or creating that is like a higher level of a use case. So because of that, I can move to each of the use cases. I'm not going to explain each of these, but basically we are going to tell, okay, there will be some actor named as an administrator, which is our admin, which can create research groups and can create researchers in this system, right? Also, this actor will be able to delete research groups or delete researchers, but mainly this is for administrative purposes. Each of the groups, research groups that will need to exist will be created by this administrator person or actor, and researchers will be initially created by this person too. And then whenever we have a researcher created, the researcher will be able to update a data set. Let's move to the update data set. And that is a function that each researcher in a research group will be able to add information as they gather in the fields. And we were actually given a set of like 20 metadata fields to fill into each data set. So the data set itself could be uploaded, but also 20 different metadata fields that they defined for us were used or were of interest for them, because they wanted to have different research groups holding access to their own data sets, at least until they were ready to open it to the public. So there were, or unless they were published or papers were published with the information gathered with these data sets, they wanted to have that, for example, during an embargo period, and then be able to release. But for that reason, they wanted different research groups to have different access permissions to their own data sets. One role that was defined is that of a PI, which is a type of researcher. So it is a researcher, but the PI can also perform other functions that the researcher wants. For example, create a data set, and that data set that was created for that PI's research group, that PI will be able to delete. So a PI is like a specialization of a specialization of a research actor. So it is also a research, but can do more than the researcher. Let me keep going with the slides, and we will move. Let me share the slides first. We will move from this editor our slides. And we having defined these functional requirements with different stories that may happen for each actor, like creating a data set, updating it by researchers. These are the main two use cases, let's say. Now we can also define things that are not so functionally clearly defined. For example, those other types of requirements that are called the non-functional requirements, or the architectural requirements or design requirements, or those requirements that from the architecture derived into the that derive into a type of architecture, right? Like refined architecture. These are usually things that are difficult to change. For that reason, there is an early risk mitigation that needs to be done, because it's risky, because once we fix this, it's hard to change. We defined that our project was going to be developed in Django, so it was going to be a Django web application, and that is Django is a model view controller based web development framework. For those who like design patterns, you will be familiar with what model view controller is. There is a discussion of why Django community, or the Django creators, use a model view controller based, but they call it something different. They called the model view, the controller, they called views, and the views they called templates. It's kind of confusing, but it is what the Django community prefers to see. So one of the requirements was, for example, define a platform for storing and sharing project data among the team members, right? And because they were located at different institutions, it could be implemented by a Django web application. And that defined what Nanjing suggested. Let's use a Django web framework. My experience, I had previously experienced with other types of web development projects, even research-related web development projects, but this was my first work with Django. So this kind of will simplify for you the steps that I have to take, which may have taken more time for me to learn, but now it's in a single tutorial so that you can see them. And it was a great decision because it simplifies a lot what you have to develop. Instead of doing all these like routinary administrative web interfaces so that you can create these, delete that, or update things. Many of these things are already provided by the Django framework. Other requirement regarding architecture were that, for example, this is taken literally from one of the emails that we received. Display something like a table of contents that shows all the data. And when we thought about what is out there that could have like a list things, then we realized Django has built-in class-based views that, for example, they can, if you create a model within your application, then it can list all the instances of your model. If we have datasets, our model is datasets, we are going to be able to list all these instances of our datasets, each dataset, through a readily available generic class-based views, which is the list view. Also, whenever we want to see the details for each dataset, there are views for that, and there are the views for edition and all that, which is the content that we will see in the next section. And there, because this is an iterative, an incremental thing, it's kind of the type of development workflow that all agiles have. We welcome change of requirements once the project started, right? And one of the things that we realized, because either nobody realized at the beginning, is that we were going to need different levels of access. And that was something Django didn't provide readily, but it's open so that third-party teams can implement. And if we look, for example, at how the Django website is implemented, we see that there is a part where there's this community section, which also has Django packages. And here we are at the django-project.com URL or domain. But if we click on Django package, it changes to django-packages.org. So it's a different domain, independent, but closely related to the Django project. And if we look, for example, for authentication or authorization packages, we will find things that do not come with Django itself, but they are available, and they, depending on how you want to order, there are several options. The one that I chose is this django-guardian project that I found that had a great community around it. It was mature. It has been developed throughout several years already. It was still maintained, and it was stable, and it looks like it was going to be around for a while. So it looked to me like a good option to implement this solution with. So going back to the slides, this was the decision that was taken. So let's implement the permissions stuff with the django-guardian. By the way, some other colleague, research engineer in the UK from the Imperial College, also found the same solution earlier than us, but I didn't know that he had written an article about it. So that could also have sped our development process if I done a more research or faster than him. But I would like to point you to his page, because it will be useful in case you would like to read more about how the django-guardian package works. And it is actually listed in the references in the last slide. So with that, let's move a little bit more to design related excuse me, matters. The main entity that we are talking about here is the dataset entity, right? This is our model in Django. What this project needs to implement a dataset, or this main, and what the dataset needs to have. It needs to have a title. It needs to have a primary contact. Like, for example, when they write papers, this person will be contacted. This is one of the researchers. Then there will be more researchers related with these datasets. Not necessarily all related or all researchers in the group, and date of current version, and many other, like if you Danjing, remember we were handled like 20 different metadata fields, but I selected 4 of them because they are simple to understand, and they are different types of data, or different relationships between the data set and the researchers. For example, to implement the relationship between the data set and a researcher, which is the primary contact, we are not going to enter a primary contact and store like that. This looks like a table, right? This is a class where I define some attributes. If you are talking about class or object-related technologies, which can be mapped into one table, apparently, right? But in the case of the primary contact, we can implement that attribute as an association, one-to-many association with the researchers, which is the researcher class. So the same that we have seen before, that attribute is now represented in a class diagram for the conceptual model that we are going to work with as a primary contact, which is a one-to-many. Each researcher can be the primary contact of many datasets, but each dataset will have only one primary contact. Then the second relationship, or the second association between datasets and researchers is a not one-to-many, it's a many-to-many. So again, there will be another association between these two classes, but the other will be many-to-many. So each dataset may have many researchers, and each researcher may be working on more than one dataset. And because researchers also belong to research groups, and each researcher may be in one or more research groups of this project, and each research group may have one or more researchers. This is the basic conceptual model or a domain model that we will be working with throughout the rest of this project. Once we understand that, we'll go ahead and see how this is implemented in code. You will see that there is a similarity between the researcher from the model and Django's user class. And there is a similarity between the research groups that we need with Django's groups. So we will probably be mapping researcher to users and research groups to Django's groups. So let's move on and execute this piece of code now, or not execute. This is the next thing that you need to do, which is create an application. With the manage Py that we have seen, we are going to create an application. I think I need to drink some water. Excuse me. We are going for our second bigger break in a couple of minutes. So let me share the terminal again. From this log that we can see here, we are now going to check out the second tag for the will be the first commit of the second part, right? Which is the result of that create or start application, startup data management. So as we see, before we execute this, let me show you what's in the directory. We only have the project created by Django, which is this tutorial with files that we have already seen, and the PyCache that we ignored because we are not going to check in with Git. Once we check out our second commit, if we look at the directories now we have this data management directory. And if we inspect what is inside that data management directory, there's models. There are other files like tests and admin to add functionality to the administrating part of Django. And there's views. So we are basically going to work with these two, models and views. The models at the beginning is going to be pretty empty. So if we cut that thing, it's just basically a placeholder, which is going to import models from DjangoDB. And the views same thing. It's just going to import something that we may or may not use for rendering pages, right? But the views are not there yet because we didn't create any model. But with the conceptual model that we have just explained, we are ready to go now for the third commit. And this third commit is writing code, is beginning to write some code. These first two commits that I showed before are simply generated automatically by Django. The first one is just creating the project. The second one was just creating an application, but this is automatically generated by Django. Now we are going to add a model, and this will look, we will see how the implementation of what we just saw in the slides looks like. So let's go ahead and go another checkout, hit checkout. Tag 22. So for this second part, the second checkout. Now, if we list what is under data management application, the project, I called it tutorial. The application, I called it data management. And within the data management application, in the models file, we defined this model called dataset. The dataset has a title, which is just a char field, right? But it's based on Django's models, which is imported from here. The primary contact is a foreign key that points to the user model that Django brings. When you develop this for a production system, not for a tutorial, you could, instead of using Django's user model directly, you could inherit from a base user class, which you can extend, and it is recommended because any change that you want to do to the user later, you can do if you inherited from that base class. And if you use Django's, it is not possible to use. And there are a couple of other options, but this is recommended to do earlier in the project. We did that. We created our own model called researcher, but for simplicity in this tutorial, we are just going to use Django's user class, right? And this is the one-to-many. So each data set will have one user. That's why this is a foreign key. When this is mapped into tables, the dataset table will have a foreign key to the user table, to the auth user that we have seen before. Then researchers, which as we have seen is a many-to-many field. So again, this is also going to the users table or the users class. Sorry, I sometimes use class language with relational database language interchangeably, because in this case, it's very easy to map one-to-one, but it's not always like that. So I should be using the corresponding terminology. So researchers is a many-to-many relationship between datasets and Django's user class, or in our model, researchers. And then current version date is a simple data field. So this, if we do a diff, if we want to see what was, this is all new. Up to here, it was probably from before, but then we added, because we are going to use relationships with user, we added this line. Actually, we can see that in the in the web, in the project, the web of the project. So let's go back to the web. In this project, we can see the commits. Main doesn't have more than just one commit, but default, which has all the commits, or we can go directly for the tag that we want to see. The tag is 22. If we go there, this, which is the last, which is the commit created here, also written following the recommended one line for the summarizing thing, and then explain a little bit more what we did here. So let's go ahead and look how that commit looks. Let's read a little bit this useful commit message. It says a new dataset must have a title. Must have a title. So we make it, we require that. And other metadata fields can initially be empty. That's one thing, and we will see why. And selections, selection lists for primary contact and researchers should only allow valid users. With that, I mean, we don't want the admin user to show up as a possible researcher. We want to skip that and list only valid researchers in our case, right? So the commits that we did touched 3 files. From all the files that were originally created by Django, we had one file that is admin, so that we can register this data set in the admin web interface. This is like, you have to understand Django, but this is what every application or most applications does. It is simple to, as simple as import from your own models file or Python module, import that dataset model, and then register that with the admin file, admin application. In settings, the change was, okay, from all the installed applications, we now want one more, which is our data management config, which was added in the commit before. Remember, we have 2 commits when we worked with this second part. We first created the application. When the application is created, there is something called whatever the application name is, or whatever the model, sorry, whatever the application name is, it also adds config, and you can include that as the application, or simply include data management, the name of the application. But this adds a little bit more functionality for the admin web interface. And the main commit is all this. We don't need to see side by side because all these lines were new. We didn't change any lines. We simply add this. Since we are here, we also learn how to use this web interface a little bit better. We can see changes in line or side by side. Whenever we are going to change lines, we see the old, how it looked before and how it looks after the change. This change, as stated here, is 3 files were changed with 13 additions or 0 deletions. In this file, specifically, 10 lines were added, no lines were deleted. And these are the lines that are shown at the beginning. So lines 1, 2, and 3 as a little bit of context. But these 2 lines were added, which is the import user and the import date, because we needed dates for this attribute. So models date field, current version date. This date today is the reason why we needed to import that in our file. Okay, so now let's see how this works. Let's look at the terminal and try to run it. So we implemented all these changes while in the upper section of the terminal was still running, or in my case was still running, right? However, nothing happened. Why? Because in order for something to change the database, also if we look at the database, let me show you the database. If we look at the database, we still have the original 11 tables. Right? How are we going to add the tables that are needed to store our model? Okay, what we need to do now, let me share the terminal again. What we need to do is under source directory, we run manage make migrations. It found one migration under the data management application, which didn't exist yet. However, nothing changed. This is a web development web server, a development web server that automatically scans files that are part of the project. And whenever the files are changes, files mainly being settings or views or models, when one of these files change, it reads those files, and if it can, it will start, it will keep running, right? Implementing these new changes in code. But this is not a change in code, this is change in database. These migrations are automatically created as we execute this, and we don't need to commit any of these migrations. They will be generated as needed. We can generate this migration at this commit, or we can go for the last one and generate the migration needed directly for the last one. So now that we created that code, and also this is Python code, right? Is Python code that then is automatically translated into a specific database, depending on what database you are working with. By default, Django creates projects that are working with the SQLite database, which is good enough for our tutorial. In our production code, we worked with a PostgreSQL database, for example, and then the same migration will be translated into PostgreSQL code or MariaDB code or something else. So now that we made the migration code ready, we can go ahead and do manage migrate. The same that we need before to create all these tables, but now we need to do it for our specific application. So that's why we have to make the migrations ourselves. Okay, now it's added. Still, nothing changed in the code. However, let's look at the database now. See, originally we had 11 tables. And now we also have the data management dataset with the title, the current version date, and the primary contact ID. But we also have other researchers, right? So the researchers, which is a many-to-many relationship, is not going to be implemented as one field in the table, which handles which stores information about dataset. It needs to be implemented as a separate table, which is a relationship between two parents table. One parent table is going to be the auth user for our researchers, and the other table is going to be data management dataset. So we also have this one, data management dataset researchers. One foreign key points to the dataset ID, which is here. The other foreign key points to the auth user ID, which is here. Okay, so now that this is implemented, let's go ahead and look at the website and see how it looks. So for that, from the terminal itself, we can say, okay, open this link, and we will see in our web browser we still have this Rocket as our home page, but if we go to the admin, where we were still logged in as the admin, let's say super user, we see that now we have datasets here, a data management application with a datasets model. And if we click on dataset and we want to add datasets, we have the primary contact. In case we have users, we have researchers, and we are not going to add datasets from here because as we have seen in the use cases, the administrator is only there to create users and groups. So let's go ahead and create some groups here. Let's add one group. We can call this research group A. And let's create another group as research group B. Sorry, I've already done this. If you are doing it by hand, you may take a little while creating the research group, but do the exercise and create it yourself. And any of these groups can be assigned some permissions. For example, in the data set we can see these are the permissions that we see in the database. Can add, change, delete, or view dataset. This is the good old CRUD. If you are familiar with databases, so it's a change, read, update, and delete records in a table of a database. And let's go ahead and in the authentication and authorization part, let's create some users. Let's go ahead and create some A user or Alice user. Let's add some password that you will easily remember. Can be the same password always. And then for that user, now we implement the name of the user and an email address for that user. We give researchers staff status so that they can use the functionality in the admin web interface. If not because they are going to use these forms, but because this admin interface also contains functionality, for example, to log in, log out, change password, and so on. Because we are not going to create all this functionality on the main website, we are going to use this from the admin interface. So that's for that reason we have staff status here, and we add this as a member of the research group A. Let me read. Okay, so we should be going for the main break. Thank you for the reminder. Let's finish this and we go for the break. So let's make this Alice member of research group A. And if you remember, the PIs were able to create datasets. So let's give this PI, let's make this a PI. With this, we are like saying that this user is going to be a PI in our model, because we said, okay, the role of PIs is that is a researcher, but can also create datasets. So let's save Alice like that and go ahead, create a couple of more users or researchers, research Bob. Same thing for Bob, staff. And Bob is going to be member of a group B. User permissions for Bob. Let's make him the PI of group B. So also he can add datasets. And let's create one third user. If we went with Alice and Bob, now we need a C, Carol. But this user will be a simple researcher, also in the group A, for example, right? This user will not have this researcher will not have like escalated privileges to create datasets. So we have these three users, we have two groups, and we will see now that these are created, how this is represented in the, how we can use one of them, how we can see them in the database, for example. Share the database screen. Now that we have these users, we can see . that users is now populated not just with admin, but with user Alice, Bob, and Carol, and same thing for groups. We have the research group A and research group B. And last query, and we can go for the break. So let's select all from what we want is out. Let's say user and groups, which is the relationship between users and groups. Remember, the first user we created was thank you. The first user we created was the admin user, but now we also have 3 new user IDs with this relationship, right, between users and groups. So this will be, let's do one more thing. Let's do a join between of users, and we call Django's user table, we call it R for researchers, and we join that with user groups, so we call it relationship user groups, and we join that on researcher ID, which is the alias for Django's user table. We join that with our users group alias user ID. Because this is a lot of information, instead, let's use researcher, just its username. And then from user and group, all. And let's create one more alias group and show all the fields so that we can do join of group, and we call this one group, joining it on the user and group group ID with our group just ID. And now we have the username from our researchers. We have Alice, Bob, and Carol with the user and group ID relationship and this group name. So this, we are joining 3 tables, 2 entities, the researcher and the research group entity, throughout this table in the middle, which is used for that, or for joining them. If we, instead of doing inner join, we do a left join, we also see that the admin, sorry, there's no usernames for admin. So there is a username for admin. But let's go for the break better, and we get here, what time? 15. My local time is 3 p.m., 3:30. Let's make a little break, a good break, and then we finish the tutorial 3:30, or whatever your local time is in half an hour. Thank you. And if you have questions, I can answer.
So far, this was showing the permission grant through what the Django provided through group and users, right? It's not touched yet on the extra thing, or am I missing?
Sorry, can you repeat your question, please?
Basically, this result was based on you create users, groups and users, and giving them certain capabilities, right? Like create or create data set or create grant. So based on the data model, this was so far formed by what Django provides the naturally, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All that is provided by Django. Our new code, let's say the code that we added by hand, is just the data management application with the dataset model and the relationships between them that we defined.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part? Which I
Yeah,
missed?
we users, which we are implemented, our researchers in our model, we are implemented that with the user provided by Django, and our research groups are implemented with Django's groups, right?
Yeah.
So those two things are readily available. Let me share the slide that contains the drawing. That would be simple to explain. If we go to our model here, we say researcher is Django's user. We map this in our model to Django's user. And we map this in our model with Django's group. So these two things are readily provided by Django, and this relationship too. The new model that we created is this one, dataset. And this relationship with user and all that, we created that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, actually, I think I got that part through the start app. What I'm saying is like in the beginning, I thought, or this also mentioned about the permissions, right? Like, so I don't know if I misunderstood or not, but I think that you mentioned giving the permission. The Django can do that, but also you are going to do also another way of giving the permissions, like fine-grained permission or different way of giving permission, or did I misunderstand?
Yes, we will need. Django gives permissions, one of these default permissions, like add, change, delete.
Yeah.
Those default permissions, you can add more permissions if you want, but all of them are implemented at the model level, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, if I take a researcher like Alice that we created, right? And gave Alice permission to add datasets, she can add dataset, any datasets. She will have permissions to add any dataset in the model table, right?
Yeah.
But well, Alice, it will always have to be like that. But for example, if I give later Alice permission, so see the permissions are given at the model level because I give Alice permission to add datasets or delete datasets or change datasets, not a specific dataset.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
that is the difference. So after going through the views, that is the next section, we are going to be able to implement the last set of requirements, which is implement permissions, but at the dataset level. So we can give permissions for a dataset to be changed by a group or a researcher, but to that specific data, to a specific dataset. If you think in terms of databases, let me show Probably this will be easier to explain for me with something visual. Let's see. Well, we didn't create any data sets yet, but let's say we go ahead and create a data set, right? And if we have one row here, which is a data set number 1, for example, we will have permissions to that specific data set to be changed or deleted or viewed to either a group or a researcher.
Yeah.
Am I being a bit more clear or not? It's not specific to the whole table, it's specific to a single row in a table.
Yeah.
So it's not the whole dataset class, or in Django parlance, the datasets model. It's specific to a single instance of that class, or a single, let's say, to an object. An instance of a class is an object, right? Or an instance of a table is a row.
Yeah.
At the object level, it's going to be set. The permissions are going to be set for each data set. We will need additional functionality for that, or additional tables even, for setting permissions that way. That makes sense?
Okay. So basically that's gonna be upcoming, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that answered it. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Ready to resume? Yeah. Let's start. Then we left at the implementation of this model with the dataset model. And now we are going to see class-based views, which are used to list and see the details and then edit. To be respectful of everybody's times, we may skip some of the class-based views to get to the object level permissions on time so that we can explain that in proper detail. So let's go ahead and start with the display views. We are going to go with the we are going to inherit from just Django's list view first to draw a list, then the same for going to see each detail of the views. And then we are going to require that in order to see the list or to see the details of the views, we have to be logged in so that not everybody can see. The first implementation will be something public, right? In order to see anything, first we have to create at least one view, at least one database. And then once we implement that, then we implement another mix-in. Mix-in is when you inherit from more than one table. So I will talk a little bit about us as we go. So let's go ahead and go for the next commit in the terminal. Share the terminal first. We are, let me double check. Yes, we are here at tag 2.2, the last part of section 2. And then we move to the first tag of the third section. The third section will have two subsections, the display views and the edit views. So let's go ahead. Git checkout 311. We do that. And we didn't change any any table in the database. So this is pure code change. So let's see how that code looks like. Let's look at the web browser. Now we go for the local host, where we see that there's no longer the funny rocket that Django provides as the default homepage. Now our homepage looks like dataset. So if we go to our repository, in the repository, we look for a repository graph there. We can see we are at this commit. list datasets. The home page is now a list of datasets. Well, in order to see a list of datasets, we will have to add a dataset first. So let's do the following. Let's in this one to be able to see any dataset, let's go ahead and add admin. And instead of logging in this, I have two browsers, either two different browsers or the original browser and a private session, so that cookies are not interchanged. So because I need to be logged into with two different users. On the left hand side, I will keep being logged with admin, just in case I have to do some administrative tasks. And on the right, I'm going to log in with one of the researchers that we created, for example, Alice. Now we can see that Alice has a similar view to the admin, but she doesn't have the power to do everything. She doesn't even see that she can work with creating groups or deleting groups, or creating researchers or deleting them. Is just the data management application, and within that data management, she can add datasets, which is the permission that we gave to her. So let's go ahead and create one dataset. Let's name it dataset 1. Because I am the PI, I will be the primary contact here, and the researchers that work on this dataset will be Alice and Carol, which are from the same group. And let's save it. So if I go here to view the site, now I can see that there is dataset 1 created there. This was created using the admin interface, right? And this is now on the left-hand side, which is the admin web interface. If I remember, Alice was given permission to add datasets, so that's why I was able to do this on this site. The changes that were implemented there were 5 files, right? Let's see what those changes are. And this is important. It is important to learn in which order things are occurring. So first, for example, we have the tutorial URLs that has been changed. So this one is not just additions, but also changes. This line number 18, has been changed by including the include module from Django URLs. And this is because we are going to need it in a new URL. So now the home page is no longer there. The rocket is going to, whenever somebody access the home page, so no subdomain, no other URLs are added to the domain of the website, it's going to include data management URLs. So same thing, but not the general URLs, the data management URL. So this one. And this one, which didn't exist before, we created the whole file by adding 7 lines, for which I needed. Again, it has the same format, let's say. There's a URL patterns list, which has the output of the path function we needed to import here as we did from the other file before. And that one includes included from here has a view which is not like the traditional or the classic function views that were implemented. If you follow the history of Django, first they implemented function views, but later, because in order to make views generic, functions were bloated with a lot of attributes. They did classes, and inheriting from those classes, they created these generic views, because what they were creating were classes, and what you need here is a function or a method. Then each class or model that you create needs to have an asView method. And where is that dataset list? Dataset is not brought by Django, it's our own view, right? So that view has to be in under our application views, which is this one. We discarded that line that was originally created when we have the application automatically created by Django. And now we said by Django generic views, import the list view model. And from our models, we import dataset. So with that, with those two pieces of information, we say class dataset list, which is our project's view, which inherits from Django's list view, is going to be based on our model named dataset. So that's all the code that we need to write. How this asView is implemented? Well, because this is inherited from Django's list view class. So all the code that we have to write to implement that list view is just this, 4 lines. And then other files that were added is, in order for this view to render something, then there is a templates directory that is being created, which has a dataset list template. By default, you can change the name of the template however you like. By default, this will be named after the model that you are using _list. This you have to create it by hand. And what I did here is adding a header in HTML. This is all separation of concerns, right? So this is, now we move to the HTML. I didn't write any code to make the render of the HTML pretty or added anything that like very sophisticated, just pure HTML so that it's easy to read. So what the template will do, you can use Django's own template, or you can use other templates from third party. But this one is pretty easy to use. You create, for example, an ordered list, and for each data set in the object list, this can also have a more specific name, but if you don't set how your view is going to call this object, by default it calls object list, there is a list item for each of them, which will just show the dataset's title. I said here what I would like to be shown as each item of the list. And because the header, HTML header and body and all the external HTML code that is going to be surrounding this block, I can move it to a different template that I can extend with this block called content. This is like the complete page. It has doc type, HTML, beginning and end, head, beginning and end, body, beginning and end. And this block called content, if I don't do anything else, and I call this template, it will show a header saying hello world. But because I extend that with my own code from the list template, then this is what we are seeing here. In fact, if we view the source page, here is what is created by our code, right? So header datasets 1, which is here, and then the unordered list, and one list item, which is dataset 1, showing just the title of the first dataset that we have. With that, let's move into more detail. Let's move into the next change that we want to implement, which is showing the details of any dataset that we have in the dataset list. So the next change, what it's going to do is same that we did before with let's close and add in order how the changes were applied. So the same thing in our URLs now within the data management URLs. For list, we used dataset list and we gave it a name, which is list. This is optional, but we are using it. And I will show you later how we are using it. Now we added another URL, which is the primary key of one of the datasets, which is an integer, which is implemented by this dataset detail view. And same way that we saw before, it also has an asView method so that it can be passed to the path function that Django needs. So where is that dataset detail implemented? Well, in my views. We previously have just imported list view. Now, on top of list view, we also import detail view because we are going to inherit from that detail view to create our dataset detail, which is going to be implemented out of the dataset model that we have here. That's how simple, that's all you have to do in order to create a detail view. The same way that we saw before with the list view, we are going first to change the dataset list so that instead of just displaying, okay, we have 20 minutes consumed. Now we are going to move a little bit faster. We will probably skip the edit views, but anyway, let's finish this one. Instead of just saying that we are going to show the title here, what we are going to do is add a URL that points to a specific data set. And for that, we use this template language that Django brings, which is, okay, from the data management, we use the detail URL. All this expands automatically to the URL that we need, and we are going to work with the dataset ID. This is a change to add an anchor, a hypertext reference to a specific data set. so that this works. So this is making this happen, right? From the template, we are going to invoke one of these, and this is going to end up showing this totally new template, which also extends from the base template that we created. And we are going to show the dataset title as the header of the page. And we show all the fields, the primary contact, the date of current version, who the researchers are, if there are researchers, and then if there are researchers, we create a list, an ordered list, and then that's how it works. Let's see it working. This page that we had before, we reload. Let me see. Oh, we explained everything online, but we need to do it locally. Let's go to the terminal. And let's do one more commit. So we are now here. Let's move to the detail view. In here, code changed. So now, if we go again to the web part, we reload this, and we see that now there is a link. If you look closer in the screen, on the bottom left part of this window, there is a URL with the primary key of this dataset. So I click there, and now this one is shown with all the details that we see. Let's move on to the details of the next part, which are how to make sure, because even if I'm not logged in as anyone, even if I log out here, so let's say, let's use the admin interface to know who I am. I am logged in as Alice, which I used to create a dataset, right? So let's say I log out. I'm not logged in as anybody. And I go to the home page. And I can still see the datasets. One level of privacy that they wanted is only researchers should be able to look at the list of datasets and at the details of the datasets. So let's go to the next commit, which is how to require that somebody is logged in. And for that, two files were changed. One is the data management views in my application, which started using the login required mixin. Login required mixins are a class, a base class in Django, from which we inherit. But this is something that the Python language allows, which is do multiple inheritance. Not all languages allow this. Because of that, when you inherit from more than one class, you may have conflicts depending on which class you inherit first. So the mixins are always put at the beginning so that you inherit these things first, and then the things that are from the let's say best class of the type of view that you are doing. This is an important detail that if you do it in incorrect order, it may hurt you. So login mixed in goes here for the list view and here for the detail view. And in order for the login to work, whenever you are required to log in, it has to point you to some web page where you are going to be asked for your credentials, right? And the way to do that is in the settings file, you are going to be required to log in at this web page. So let's go ahead and move one more commit in the terminal.
It seems that we might have lost Diego.
He is currently reconnecting. Maybe just a little.
Sorry, my reconnection worked now. My connection was lost. It may happen. Even the machine is tired at this point. So let's see how I can re-share those windows that I need. This one. And this one. Can you see that too?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's reload this one. And now it doesn't show me the list anymore. Now it requires that I be logged in. And let's log in with somebody, let's say Carol. So in order to see the datasets list, now I needed to log in. With that, let's go ahead and move to the next one, the next commit. This commit is going to require not just being logged in, but also to have authorization to log in. So, sorry, not to have authorization to view the datasets. This only requires changes in the views file, but now on top of being logged in, it will require me as a user to have permissions it will make use of the permissions required mixin, and we have to tell, so 2 mixins are used now for each view that I create for my application. And this one, the permissions required, you need to specify what permissions you are going to require. In this one, the permission that I am going to require is the view dataset. Let's go ahead and go to the terminal. And let's check in for the next we required authentication already. Now we require authorization. 314. As the web development, the development web server notices that the views file was changed, it reloads. No changes were made in the database, so now the code automatically starts working. So let's go ahead and see how it is implemented in the web. I was looking at this web page logged in as Carol, and if I reload the page, I no longer can see neither the detail of that data set nor even the list, because now I am requiring that those two views, the list and the detail, to have permission to view the dataset. So one thing, okay, we are at 30 minutes. I think we can go and finish the tutorial from now on rather than do a little break. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and keep going. So the next change, the last for this section, is require proper authorization. And the authorization consists of the permissions required, all that we already seen. So in the admin view, remember that on this side I am logged in as one of the researchers. On this side I am logged in as the admin. What we are going to do is adding permissions to view and change. Let's add only permissions to view, not to a user specifically, but because Carol and Alice, if you remember, they were both added to research group A. Let's add permissions on one of the groups, which is group A, so that we see it working. So we search for the data management application. Within that, the only model that it has is the data set. So we are going to say, let's allow this group or members of this group to view the data set. Save that. As soon as I refresh, now I can see the data set once I am logged in and I have permissions to view, because I belong to group A. If I logged out, admin, if I logged out as Alice and log in again as Bob, which was the PI for the group named group B, and I go to view the site, I am forbidden because group B does not have permission until I add members of research group B permission to view the dataset, and then logged in as Bob in group B. If I reload, now I can see the list and I can see the details. So it looks pretty simple. It takes a while to understand all this and assimilate, but it is certainly shorter once you understand the time that it takes to write code, and it prevents a lot of possible bugs to be introduced and errors. This is like if you're going to do numerical algorithms, go and use the pre-existing numerical libraries that are out there. So this is the same kind of thing. So let's go ahead and make progress with. We could explain, even if we don't go commit by commit, what the changes in edit views are going to be, and so that we can move on to the last section. The change to add functionality to create datasets requires that in the let's see in order so that it is easier to understand. It requires one more URL. We previously have the homepage with the list. When we pass one primary key, it goes to the details. And now for edit, I made my own standard, which is for edit views, I am going to use tilde and the name of the operation. So for example, tilde create, I can pick any name that I like, right? But tilde create is going to be used to call a dataset create as view method. And where that dataset create is going to be defined, well, in my views here. In order to create a dataset, now I added the create view from Django's possible list of predefined generic views. And that create view, I am going to use it here. Because in order to create views, I want the user, the PI, to be logged in and have permissions for doing that. These are the mixins that I add the same way that I did before, only that the permission required now, instead of just view, is going to be add dataset. And the fields that are going to be added are title, primary contact, research. So are the four fields that we saw. How this is going to be rendered? Well, there will be a dataset form, HTML, that is going to take care of all the fields that I defined just by calling a as p method from the form class in this template. And in order for that to work, because when you create a data set, after you fill all the fields, you hit submit, it's going to take you to a new page. The new page that you are going to take to is the detail view. And so I have to define, there are a couple of ways where to define it, but one way to do it is define it directly in the models. So the model originally had one dunder string or dunder string dunder method just to show the title of a dataset. Now we also define a get absolute URL so that we return the reverse, the result of this reverse method going to the detail view. How this works, let's see. Go to the terminal. Let's update this. We are here. We want to move here, add functionality to create datasets. So let's do git checkout. 3, subsection 2, first commit. It detects that URLs changed and reloads. And now we will see how that works. Can you still hear me? Sorry, I lost my connection again. We'll reshare the terminals, the web pages. And let's see. I want to go. I was logged in as Bob, which is a PI for, he has permission to add datasets, right? And if we go to view the site, and instead of that, I do build the create. We can now create datasets from our application. We don't need the admin web page. So this one, we can add flexibility as much as we want. We can do ourselves as the primary contact, add, and it takes me to the view, to the detail view. It renders the detail view here. That's how I created a new view. I can also log out with this user, Bob, which is a PI. And if I log in with Carol, let's say, that was not API, I can go and view the site. I can see two datasets now created by two different groups. So the problem that we see here now is that two things I want to show. First is that I won't be able to create because I don't have permissions. So correct, permissions are working fine. However, the problem now, according to what we defined in our requirements, is that I can see, being Carol, a member of group A, I can see the data sets of any member, and if of any group, sorry. And if we are going to we are here, right? But if we are going to add functionality to update and to update, for example, datasets, we will be able to update datasets of any group. And the PI, which is going to be added permission to delete, is going to be able to delete datasets of any groups. And that's not what we want. What we want is to go specifically for a dataset. So that's what we are going to see. We are going to skip this couple of commits. You can see, having access to this website, the details. This website will remain publicly open, and we can move now to this commit, which is set permissions for researchers and groups at the dataset level. So let's go ahead and look for that type of change. So set permissions for researchers and groups at the dataset level requires one new thing. First, it requires that we have another package, which is called the Django-guardian package, that third package that we we'll use in this project. And that needs to be added to the project's settings. And also we are going to integrate that with the admin application and another thing that we need to do is database migration is required because it will add a couple of tables, right? One table to hold the permissions at the model level or at the dataset level for groups, and another table for managing the permissions of permissions at the dataset level for the users. So let's see how this change, what changes were made to include that django-guardian, and then we install the package that is missing. We may see the error if we try to use it without the package installation, and we see why or how to make it work. So as we said, in settings, we have to add one new application here. Installed applications, we added on top of the default ones that came, we now first added in previous commits the data management config. Now we are going to add the guardian config application. And also, this is the default backend, authentication backend used by Django, which is called Django country auth backends model backends. Now, django-guardian, the django-guardian package also needs its own object permissions backend. So these are the two changes that are needed in the settings. This is also explained on django-guardian's web page, which is listed as one of the references through an example. If you read the documentation there, you can learn about this, and also if you download the example, you will see the same steps applied in that example. Okay, for the admin part of our data management application, we are going to import the Guardian model admin class or model so that we can inherit from and implement our dataset admin part of the web admin interface, and we can add a couple of attributes, like, for example, list, the list display ordered by title, or search fields, we can search by title and so on. And then we already have that dataset registered. Now we add one more application, which is the dataset admin, added to the Django admin interface. And from the views that we had created, remember we had this login required mixin, permission mixin from Django. Well, now we are going to use not Django's mixins, but django-guardian's mixins, which login required remains the same. Permission required remains the same in the case of the other views, but for the list view, we are going to need to use django-guardian's permission list mixin. So it looks like there's some differences in the implementations of how permission works at the model level for the default Django permissions compared to permissions at the object level for from django-guardian, the django-guardian package. And one more thing that needs to be done is in that views let's see, in the dataset create, when we create an application, it needs this piece of code for this to work. This is used to avoid some type of error that I have during the development. I will try to point out where it was, but if not, probably I should add this to as an annotation to the slides or something that can be of help. But if you don't add this was I found how to do this in the issues of the django-guardian application. The django-guardian package. So let's go ahead and see how these permissions at the object level start to work and fix this issue that we have here, that everybody can see everybody else's data set. So let's go to the terminal. We are currently, well, here we skip these functionalities for updates and deletes, and we want to get here. So git checkout. Okay, something happened here in the upper section of the screen, right? What happens? No module named Guardian. So if we do the pip list command, we see that we have Django installed before, but now we need Django Guardian. So let's look for that. And instead of installing on top of having Django installed, now we are going to need to install Django Guardian. This is the name of the package. Now if we list, Django Guardian is also installed. And now, if we reload the pages, let me see. I think we should go to the upper part. Go to the upper part of the screen. This is like the poor development web server couldn't handle this one, so we have to restart. One thing, now we have the package installed, right? However, this is something like we saw at the beginning. We have two unapplied migrations. Why? As soon as you install the Django Guardian package, your project knows that there should be a couple of more migrations to be done. You have two migrations for the Guardian application. So let's do that. Let's do, in my lowercase, I will do manage, make my, we don't need to make the migration because this is part of a library of the Django Guardian package. It's not our own specific migration. So we just go with make, so with migrate. The two migrations occurred there. So now if we relaunch, we don't need to relaunch, but just to show that it won't show that error, it is happy to continue working. And if we go to our web browsers now, let's see. I still can see the datasets because I have permissions in the in the group to see any data set. So what I am going to do is remove all permissions on the group A, save, and same thing for the group B, remove all permissions and save. So now none of the groups have any permissions to view or delete or change datasets at the dataset level. But if we go to, not to authentication and authorization application, let's go even further to the home. Now, if we go within the data management application, if we go to, let's say, dataset 1, which was the one who has primary contact Alice, which was member of the group A, and we want this button here is new, object permissions. So now for this specific, see, this is dataset 1 only now. It's not just dataset, it's this specific dataset, this object, or this instance of the datasets class. If we go there, now we say, for example, user identification. The user who has been able to create that was Alice. So let's look for Alice. And only for this user, we are going to assign permission to delete and save it. There is no, it doesn't make any sense to add permissions to add before the object exists, right? So the add permission needs to remain at the model level, the class level. But once that object is created and uniquely identified with that primary key from the database, then to that specific occurrence of the class, we add permission to delete to Alice. And at the group level, we can see, we can look for group A, or research group A. For this research group, we can add permissions to view and add permissions to change. So any member of group A will be able to view and change permissions for dataset dataset 1. We are going to do the same for the other dataset 2, object permissions. Now we want PI Bob to be able to delete it. And at the group level, instead of research group A, all members of research group B are going to be able to view and change permissions on dataset 2. So let's see how this works. We are running out of time, I guess. Yeah, 4:30. Okay, we are going to finish this with the last implementation. So let me reload this. I was logged in as admin, as Carol, which is not a PI. So when I view the site, Carol can only see data sets in the group A. And if we log with a different user in a different group, for example, Bob, and we go to the view site, Bob only can see data sets in the group B. This is the basic implementation of permissions at the object level. The second commit is how to do the same thing programmatically. So instead of having to do all the work that I did manually, you can say, do the view dataset and change dataset for the group of the PI, and do the delete dataset permission for self, for the user that has been able to create that dataset. So we'll skip this one, but this is what you need to do. You can look at this step. The last commit that I want to explain because it is important regarding not leaving orphaned object permissions in the database is this one. The permissions in the tables that were created were implemented using generic tables for the Django django-guardian. Let me show that in the database. In the DB browser, we have 13 tables created now that we have added data management dataset and the dataset researcher link, right? But if we update this, now we have 15 tables. The new tables that were added are these two. The Guardian group object permission, which identifies a group ID and a permission ID for this content type ID, which will be a data set. And not just the content type IDs, but a specific instance of that content type ID. The content types are, for example, this Django content type. Before we had this 6, then we added this data set, and now we have 2 more content types, which is group object permission and user object permission, right? But anyway, because we point at this data set content type here, this is, if we stop here, is the same that we already have at the model level, right? But to be able to point at a specific data set, we also need this. However, these 2 tables, one is for the group and one is for the user permissions, point at, are used for anything, for any type of model that you want to add permissions. The problem with that is when you these permissions are implemented when you need foreign keys. For example, this thing that points to a specific object or a specific data set in our case. If you delete the data set, let's show it. If you delete a data set, you are going to be left with orphaned permissions. So there will be permissions that do not point to any existing data set. Let's do one of these and see how it works. For example, logged in as Bob here, I am able to see and delete, not just update, but delete dataset 2. Are you sure? Yes, confirm. Now, my list, the list of datasets for group B is empty, right? So if I go and look at the database, and look at the Guardian group object permissions, there are permissions pointing to dataset 1 and permissions pointing to dataset 2, object primary key 2. Yes, we are ending soon, Sophia. We have one more commit to do to solve this problem, and we finished.
Okay.
Thank you. So we see these permissions relating to dataset 2, which no longer exist. Let's see. Let's confirm this. We only have one dataset. So this is not a terrible problem, because if we list datasets, we will have all the permissions applied to each dataset, right? But it is not wise to leave orphan permissions in case we reuse primary keys. Those permissions could be applied to the new dataset, and we didn't intend to have permissions pre-applied to a dataset if we are reusing user ID. It's not very likely that this will happen, because every new dataset that is being created is generated a new primary key. But anyway, let's go ahead and see what the last commit requires, and is this one. I'm trying to see. Let's not lose any more time and go to the terminal instead. So in here, we are going to do .3. Yeah, that's the last one. So check in, check out 4.3. It detected that the file models was changed. And for that to work, we will need to make migrations. And we will show you in a moment, because we now created two new models in our models file that is within our data management application. And those two new models are the group object permission and the user object permission for our dataset. So it is now specific to our model. The name implies that. So with these two, we can now see what the changes need. Well, the changes needed is just adding these two new models. What we should end up with is showing where those permissions are going to be added in the dataset. So let me show you. Let's create one last dataset, since Bob was left with no datasets. Let's create one for him now. And say we have created dataset 1 and 2. Let's create 3. Again, Bob and Bob, and we save it. Oops, operational error. Not such table. Okay, sorry. What we did is we created the migration. We make the migrations, but we also need to apply that migration. So migrate. Now those migrations were applied. So if we go back to the web browser, We reload this page. Yes, present. Now it created, and we went directed to the detail dataset 3. And if we eliminate that in the URL and we go to the list, now we have a dataset 3. Last thing is where these objects are now living. Because the permissions are now for Bob are correct, but for Alice and Carol still remain in the other table. They cannot see their data set. So this is something that is nice to see during this tutorial, but it is not, you shouldn't be working with these changes on a production system, right? You either place the permissions in one table or in the other, and then you start from there. It's not something that you can keep doing. This is like, all of that is during development, right? You shouldn't be doing these things because either you will be missing information and then your researchers will get very nervous because they cannot see their data. The information is still there. So let's look at the database, and with that we will finish. So here, data management dataset. Now we have dataset 1 and dataset 3. Primary contact ID. So let's see, let me understand this. Title. ID. And these are datasets. Okay, but the ID number 3, which named dataset 3, it looks like I also named it dataset 3. Anyway, the permissions in the dataset group are still there. Group ID 2. The content object ID is 4. So dataset 4. This one. And the user object permissions is also for 4. However, if we look at the new tables, this is Guardian group and object permissions. Now in this table, the group object permission, we have the permissions ID corresponding to the view and change for the group ID 2, and also we have for the user object permission for user ID 3, the new permissions stored in this new table. So basically, the tables are now these two. Sorry, Guardian, we already have seen this. We have these new 2 tables, which have one less field than the generic django-guardian table. Let me read. Yeah, we are 15 minutes past and we finish here. So django-guardian identified a unique data set by using a generic table, which in order to point to a single data set, it needs the content ID datasets and an object primary key, a specific dataset, right? So with these 2 fields, it identifies a single dataset. When you create datasets more specific to our model, we let the database do the work, and we only need the permission ID, add, change, create, delete, etc. And then either the group ID or the user ID, these two things. And then the content object ID is the one that points to a specific data set in our case. We don't need two fields, we need just one field to identify the data set, because what type of model we are pointing to is already meant by the name of the table. You can name it however you like, but it makes sense to name something related to the model that you are working with. With that, I will consider the tutorial finished. If you have any questions, you can let me know.